Bridging Gaps, the business podcast with Deborah Levitt, sharing the challenges and stories of fellow business owners. Hello and welcome to this edition of Bridging Gaps, the business podcast. Today I have Matz Skoog here with me, and Matz comes from a background of ballet, the performing arts, and I'm really excited to be here to talk to him about his current role with coaching and learning about how he's made that transition to come from a ballet dancer in Sweden and lots of other experience through to where he is today. So hello and welcome, Matz.
Hello, Deborah. Thank you for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here.
So Matz, do you want to just explain to people a little bit about what you're doing now and, how you're working with people?
Sure. Well, as Deborah just pointed out, I come from a performing arts background, from dancing particularly, and I've always been interested in leadership development and in coaching in particularly, especially since I myself have been in leadership positions in my career. I've understood that having coaching support is tremendously important and what it can add when you're facing challenges. And of course, coming from the performing arts background, that adds a perspective that I now can apply into my coaching, which is, I think, a little bit unusual perhaps in our business.
I think you're right there. Most of the people that I've spoken to, who are coaches in one way, shape, or form, tend to come more from a corporate background and to have taken that experience and want to apply it in other ways or to make a bit of a career change. So I think the performing arts aspect is definitely an unusual one. So do you work mainly with people who are in the performing arts or who are in dance, or do you work with a wider range of people?
I do work with a wider range, although, of course, with my background, clearly a lot of my professional network is still within the performing arts, within music, within dance and theatre and so on. So, yes, I do have a lot of clients from that world, but I also have other clients that come from other walks of life. And to be honest with you, I find that in a way more interesting and more challenging to work with people that are not from the theatre. Partly because I find myself, especially if I work with a dancer, which is my own background, I find myself wanting to become an advisor and a teacher rather than a coach. And of course, when I work with people that come from a completely different professional background, it becomes much more of a pure coaching relationship, which is very satisfying.
And do you find that people from different backgrounds, do they have different challenges to the people in the dance or the music, or are they the same challenges just in different environments?
I think the challenges are remarkably similar wherever you come from, and in whatever profession you're in. And it has often to do with personal presentation, personal performance, and stepping forward and a sense of confidence, because stage anxiety, performance anxiety and lack of confidence, all of those sort of things, because this is of course very common amongst performers. You would have thought someone who walks out on a stage in front of 2,000 people are tremendously confident and competent people, and yes, they are very competent, but not necessarily that confident. So confidence is something that seems to go across the board. Confidence, presentation, just stepping up to the mark, really.
And it is, I know I've come across people, well, and myself as well, it is that putting yourself out there, isn't it? So whether, I guess, you're putting yourself out there because you're actually on a stage, or whether you're putting yourself out there because you're, in your business environment or your personal life, trying to make that next step, it is really difficult to do.
And of course, just anyone who's facing change is also in a sense facing a performance, because it's also putting yourself out there, because you are entering into the unknown, just as you do when you're presenting yourself in front of an audience. You're taking a risk. you're taking a chance. You're stepping into an environment which is unfamiliar. Even in the small change is challenging and uncomfortable, as we know, because anything that is unfamiliar, even if it's a good change, it's still uncomfortable because it involves putting yourself forward and stepping up and stepping forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with the sort of, the change aspect and putting on a performance. I remember quite a long time ago now, I used to run training courses on things like Microsoft Word and all of that. And I did always feel when I went into that training environment that I was putting on, my trainer hat, and I was now smiling, and and it didn't matter how I felt that particular day. That was my performance role that I needed to play. Which, well, people say to me, oh, you're really happy. So I'm not really.
Well, yes, even in an ordinary sort of situation like you just described in the training, even in front of a handful of people, there is still an element of performance that needs to be performed, and there are some very simple little tricks or skills that you can learn that will immediately enhance your presentation. Just the things about posture and eye contact, or a sense of moving your arms, perhaps, or the hand gestures as you're speaking to a group of people. Little things that will just enhance and improve your show and make it more. May perhaps help you communicate better, but also make it more enjoyable for an audience and more easy to take on board the message that you've communicated.
Do you, when you're working with people, are you helping them with those sorts of things? So do you go, look at somebody who's nervous about presenting or whatever they've come to you to speak about, and say, okay, well, actually, let's look at some of the ways you can change your physical presentation, as well as the deeper aspects of it.
Indeed. I mean, it might be, for instance, if you're walking up to a lectern, you're about to speak in front of a group of people, and you have to stand behind the lectern. There's a way of doing that and approaching the podium that will immediately communicate a sense of certainty, a sense of authority. If you're shuffling forward with a hunched back and staring into the floor and sort of looking at your notes, then perhaps you're not going to communicate a sense of confidence to your audience. So, it might be a simple thing like that. How are you going to approach the podium from your position in the room where you were previously? For instance, it would be as simple as that. Yeah.
That's really interesting, because you don't, I know that we obviously see people going up to the podium or whatever, and react to it, but don't necessarily consciously react to it. And I think that for me, I tend to react then, or I assume I'm reacting to how they're then presenting themselves once they speak. But of course, they might have actually set the scene for me before they even open their mouth, which I hadn't really thought about before.
Indeed. And of course, we communicate continuously with people around us. And to some degree, this communication is outside of our control. But if you're at least aware of those aspects of your communication that you can control, such as your posture and your way of moving and the tonality of your voice and so on, at least those things that you can control, you have a much better chance of coming across better.
It's funny, isn't it, that just those small things can have such a huge impact. And as you say, they can be completely unconscious and outside of our control how people react to them. So Matt, what sort of, so I know that you're a high performance coach, but what type of, if we wanted to put that into context for people, who do you help and how do you help them? So how would you describe your coaching and what you're aiming to support people in?
Well, the term high performance has come, I have taken that as my field because I come from a high performance background, as having been a ballet dancer and performed at a very high level within that profession, I kind of understand performing under pressure and being ready, when the curtain goes up, so to speak.
Mhm.
So, and because of that, I have felt that those insights that I have gained can all be applied almost in any sort of circumstances. It's not only about presenting yourself in front of a group of people or public speaking or something like that. It's also perform for yourself. Perhaps you have ambitions that you want to realize and goals in life you want to achieve. That's also, in a sense, a performance. So the term high performance has actually, the way I apply it, quite a broad application. So it's not just like, I'm coaching people into being fabulous and stepping up and being there. Of course, I'd like to do that too. But it's also about coaching people with their own personal challenges in life and just feeling more comfortable about themselves in times of change, or helping with planning and so on. So there is a rather broad application of what I do.
There's people who are coming to you for whatever reason has triggered their feel that they need some sort of support, and you're then helping them to, I guess, to affect that change that they want in, whatever shape it might take. That's
right. And it's, of course, the high performance aspect coming from performing arts. And when you start looking at people's issues through that paradigm, that's when I feel that I can provide something which perhaps might be different and perhaps lend a different kind of facility to someone that they may otherwise not have been aware of. So so the high performance catchphrase, as it were, is to reflect both my background and what I can contribute from there, but also the kind of people I like to work with. I like to work with intelligent, clever, successful, motivated people that are already high performers. Of course, we all want to work with people like that, don't we? But that's also what I mean when I say that I'm a high performance coach. It also means that I want to work with you because you are a high performer.
So you're aiming to help them get to the next level.
Absolutely.
Would that be
from good to great.
Great. Okay, excellent. And you said in there, you mentioned about planning and things like that, and that's obviously a specific interest of mine. So have you found for your clients that they tend to have any problems or general challenges, I suppose, around productivity, planning, that type of thing, or are they coming from different angles when they come into you?
I think that's it's almost always an element of coaching, planning, because I think we all, to be honest, suffer from a degree of procrastination. We all have a tendency to give into that. So planning, project management is a natural part of the coaching process. Looking at creating smart goals and that sort of thing, and yeah, it's you could say that it is project planning. It's as simple as that sometimes, but yeah, so it's always part of coaching, I have found.
I think you're right around, the need for it, and people, whether they call it planning, whether they call it a project, it is always an element of pretty much everything we do, whether it's personal or, work related. And the procrastination is just, I think as you said, we've just all got varying levels of how much we procrastinate or whether we recognize it as such. So what about for you personally? Do you find that you have a tendency towards those sorts of things? And if so, how do you actually address them? How do you make sure that you aren't procrastinating and that you are putting plans in place and following them and being as productive as you'd like to be?
Well, I guess on a personal level, I face the same challenges as everybody in that respect. I have to sometimes knuckle down and make my to-do lists and look at the priorities and decide what I should be doing, what I should be doing now, and what I should be doing tomorrow. So on a personal level, I use the same tools and the same techniques and tricks that I then try to communicate to the people I work with. But most of all, I've found when it comes to planning or change, there is basically only three things that you need. One is that you need to know what you want. Two, you need to know what you need to do to get what you want. And then three, you need to do what you know you need to do in number two. So it's basically knowing what you want, knowing how to get there, and then to do it. Those are basically the three elements that we come up against all the time. It sounds terribly simplistic, but then I think it probably is that simple. But then, as all great things in life, simplicity is the hardest thing to achieve.
You're so right. It's, you say things, and I know sometimes when I'm speaking to clients that I think, well, this must be obvious, and I'm worried that I'm going to almost insult them because I'm, feel like I'm stating something obvious. But of course, achieving that and doing it for yourself is a far different thing to actually just knowing that it's simple and that you should be able to do it. And I think we beat ourselves up a lot over what we think we should have done, as opposed to accepting that this is something, a lot of people will find difficult. Simplicity being an ideal.
And simplicity coming also, again, going back to the arts background, is, of course, like all great art, is basically very, very simple. We look at, it's highly, infinitely deep, but basically very simple. When we see some of the great artworks of history. But there's another aspect of the artistic creative process which is relevant to coaching, and why I think coming from the arts background helps me as a coach, because the artistic creative process is basically dealing with change, but also it's dealing with the unknown. It's entering into the unknown, the unfamiliar, creating that which has never been created before. Because that's one of the marks of great art, is that is something that no one thought of before. And of course, that's the fundamental object of coaching. So again, there is that connection between the two, which I find fascinating, and which one of the reasons why I really love what I'm doing. Yeah, because I still feel as a coach, I'm still in a creative environment. I'm enabling people to enter into the unknown, to do the new, the different, something which is they've never done before. And that is, of course, fundamentally the artistic creative process.
Absolutely. And I'd never thought about it that way. So I'd never really made the correlation between the two. Well, it's really interesting. So my perception, and you could probably going to tell me that I'm wrong, but my perception, if I thought of, a ballet dancer, I would tend to think, in one of the, big ballet companies, I would tend to think that they themselves are obviously becoming an expert at what they do in terms of their skill set, but that there is somebody there who is always telling them what to do. So there's the choreographer, there's the, artistic directors, whoever else is involved. And that your job at that stage isn't to be creative. It's to enact somebody else's creativity. Would that be true, or would that be...
Yes, it is true up to a point, what you're saying. You're absolutely right. But there is a creative artist, and then there's the interpretive artist. And so what you're describing is an interpretive artist, someone who is interpreting the work of someone else. And of course, you're right. As a member of the corps de ballet, yes, you are interpreting the work that has you been instructed to do. But even within that interpretation, there is an element of creation that you contribute. So even at that level, even at this sort of a simple corps de ballet level, there is an element of creativity that is required from you. So you're not in that position necessarily excluded from creativity and being part of the process.
Okay, oh, that's really interesting because, well, I just told you my view. So how would you go? I'm just trying to think of your background of how you've made that transition from being a ballet dancer to taking on guest roles at other ballet companies, to the artistic director, through to the coaching. Have you found that your creativity or your approaches have become, or have they shifted? So have you become more aware of the need to plan, more aware of the creative aspects, or how have you made those transitions, and what have you been aware of, or when you look back, what are you now aware of?
Now, it's a very good question because my own path through my career and through life was starting as an 8-year-old in full-time training to learn to dance and to learn a profession, because I was in a very old-fashioned school where you were put there to learn a job, not just because it was an afternoon activity, which I was in full-time training from when I was 8 years old until I was 18, and then I was in the profession. Actually, at some point in my mid-teens, they started to pay me for what I was doing, and then I progressed through the corps de ballet to soloist positions, to principal positions, and then into leadership positions and artistic director and so on. And most of that, it was just sort of you sort of bumbled on from one area to the next. And I must say, had I had access, or had indeed personal coaching been even invented at that time, I'm sure I could have possibly had a more productive and probably certainly a more enjoyable time. Because whilst a lot of my performance career was very successful, I'm very pleased to say, some of it was quite tough and hard work. And I think had I had access to personal coaching, in the sense of life coaching or performance coaching, when I transitioned from my dancing career into my teaching and leadership career, I think I would have been able to progress much quicker and in a much more comfortable and in a happy environment. I mean, it worked out very well, as it were, but at the same time, and that's one of the reasons why I got into coaching myself. When I was standing at the top of my field, I suppose, as artistic director of a national ballet company, the English National Ballet at the time, and I thought, wow, here I am. I'm kind of top of the mountain here. How can I use this now in order to help other people that are going to come up through the same career path which I have had? So that's when I sort of came into contact with coaching in the first place, or when I became aware of coaching, because up until that point I didn't even know it existed.
And I think coaching in the past few years has really changed and is much more acceptable, and much more accessible as well. So do you, as part of your work now and your professional network of people who are presumably still in the dancing and the music industries and all of that, do you feel that you're able to, I guess, encourage them to recognize that while yes, people can make the transition from being the person on stage to being the person who's leading and directing, that actually there are ways to make that easier and more successful and to support them more effectively in it? Is that something that you're, I guess, encouraging them to see, or is that something that is just, outside your realm at the moment?
No, it is definitely something which I'm trying to encourage my personal network of professional contacts and colleagues to see that they can actually add to what they do today. Some of the performing arts, I can't speak for all of the various art forms, but certainly in dance is still, in some degrees, a little bit old-fashioned and still very hierarchical. So the idea of coaching, which is it's starting to enter in to the profession in connection with career transition. When for instance a dancer goes from an active dancing career, because most dancers, of course, finished early to mid-30s. They finished with their dancing career because of it's an athletic activity.
Mhm.
So a lot of dancers are seeking coaching from that point onwards. Now, I believe also that if you could provide coaching from the beginning of a dancing career, even then you would have, coming towards the end, you would have a much more prepared person. So that's one of the things that I'm trying to introduce into the ballet world, particularly the ballet world, more so than the contemporary dance world. That insight and understanding that coaching is something that we can use for personal professional development throughout a career. It's not just at the one point in your life you need it. If you can have it throughout your working life. But so that's it within the performing arts. But also I think that the same can be said in any professional sort of circumstances. If you can actually provide coaching throughout anyone's career path, you have better chances of success, better chances of personal and professional satisfaction, better chances of a happy retirement when that day comes even.
Yeah, and I guess it's true because I can only speak for myself, but I've just kind of gone to things, and one thing has led to another. I've never had a plan that said, okay, this is where I'm going to go to. There will be a point where I can't do that, therefore I will do this. Whereas, as you say, if you've got that coming along, beside you, that somebody is helping you to think about that and to see where do you want to go, what's really giving you that satisfaction and happiness in life, it's much easier to deal with, especially if you've got that recognition that, early on, your body at some point is going to say, I've had enough. And rather than going, oh, shoot, it's starting to give me those signs, what do I do, and panic, to actually know what the next step is.
Yeah, I mean, that's why, I didn't have a plan until I started with coaching, and then it became a plan. So here I am. Finally, age 60, I've got a plan.
We all start at various different points, don't we? But I think there's a lot more. I think the world has changed from when we were younger to, somebody now who's 60 or 70 is no longer old in the same way that I feel they were when we were younger. I think that now we're very much, there's life to live, there's stuff to be done. And that more and more people are starting, that change, whatever it is in business, in, career, that makes them happy at, probably from 40 plus. And I think it's a really kind of neat thing to look at and to see how it's not just, okay, I've retired and I'm going to fit in the age old, okay, I'll potter around the garden and go to the pub. And there we go, that's it. So it's a very different world, I think.
Oh, well, if I had an independent income, I might potter in the garden and go to the pub as well, but that's not the case.
True. Some of these things drive us, don't they?
Yes.
So in terms of starting your, actually, I'm going to go back a little bit. Again, I'm assuming that in your roles as, as the director of the English National Ballet, of being a dancer, that those were employed positions, that you were in a job, you knew you had an income coming in. Is that correct?
That's right. When I was a dancer or an artistic director, but essentially, I suppose I've been in the performing arts. You're always working for yourself to some extent. So it's on and off throughout my entire career. I've always also worked freelance, but it's true. When I was employed as a dancer, yes, I was employed, and I was employed as an artistic director. Then, of course, I was in full employment. But then, in between all of that, and right now, I'm certainly working on a freelance basis, and I think that's the other thing that you bring coming from the performing arts background is that successful artists, are generally quite entrepreneurial, because it's just not enough to be good at your craft. There was a time in the past when that was sufficient. You were good at your craft and you could live a happy life doing your job. Today, especially with our society as it is, even if you the best at what you're doing, you also have to be an entrepreneur and sell yourself and continue with your marketing. And that's something which artists do all the time without realizing it, that they're actually being entrepreneurs. They think they're just doing their job as artists, but actually they're being entrepreneurs.
And do you have any, I guess, specific examples of that, or any guidance or tips that you can use to, for other people to think about or to learn from, whatever industry or background they're coming from?
Well, there's the analogy of the curtain must go up on the first night, because you can look at any arts project, theater project, and you can bet your bottom dollar that on the first night, the curtain will go up. So there might have been chaos up until that moment, but the curtain will go up because there is a systematic, or sometimes a chaotic systematic. Is there chaotic systematic? Or whatever. But it can be chaos, but there is always, you always arrive at your destination, which I find sometimes in business is not always necessarily the case, because there isn't that sense of performance and that there is an audience out there waiting for you. Because one of the fundamental differences between the arts and business is that in business, the ultimate objective of business is profitability, is profit. Mm-hmm. And of course, the ultimate objective in the arts is the product. Of course, it has to be a profitable product, but the object of any artistic endeavor is the actual product before profit. So there is those things that you can use as analogies when you're speaking to someone who comes from another walk of life.
Yeah, and that's very true. So do you think that most people in the artistic, so if we stay with dancing, because obviously that's your background, that they at certain levels aren't concerned whether or not there's profitability in it? Or do you think that there's always an underlying awareness that the product needs to be good, partially for your personal satisfaction and pride in what you're delivering, but also because if it's good, then you're going to have people paying to see it and people investing to support it? Is that a constant awareness, or is it?
Well, depends on what level you are. Certainly, if you're an artistic director of an arts company, then you are very aware of that profit is indeed an essential requirement for ongoing business. But I think even at that level, you are focusing on your product, and that's one of the challenges of being in leadership positions within the arts, is to finding that balance between knowing that profit is essential, but also that you have to produce the goods and you have to produce quality. Ultimately, quality drives the arts more than profit. So if you produce mediocrity, it's just not going to be successful. You can produce work that is not necessarily of everybody's taste, but you cannot produce mediocrity and expect to be successful.
And are there challenges with going down that, so you said you can produce work that's not to everybody's taste, but are there drivers as well of going, well, actually, no, if I'm going to make money and be good quality and continue people, putting bums on seats, my safer route is to continue going down the tried and true? Or is there actually, no, I'm trying to think of what word I want. It's not really creative, but the route that would ultimately have more risk but more reward is going down that unexplored route. So is there a driver to, okay, I can choose this one, which is pretty safe, or I can choose this one, which is riskier, but maybe higher value ultimately from all aspects?
Well, that's a matter of programming, and you'll find if you want to have one risky project, then you need to do another project which has less risk. Let's say, for instance, you want to produce a program of new experimental work, you know that's not going to necessarily be commercially highly successful. It can be successful, but it may not be. So, on the other hand, you probably stage, I don't know, Swan Lake. Swan Lake is the best-selling ballet of all time. You can put
Oh,
Swan Lake on at any time, and you will always fill a theater. It's amazing. So
I love Swan Lake, it has to be said.
it's a fantastic ballet. It's a beautiful ballet, and there's a reason why it's successful, because it's a great work of art. But but so you use those sort of ballets. In the dance world, you would use the Swan Lakes and the Nutcrackers and so on, in order to also be able to present work that has more risk and it might require a different type of investment. Yes.
So again, it's about balance, which applies to so much of life again.
Yeah, absolutely.
From a work perspective and a life perspective, obviously the arts and dance has been a huge part, key aspect of your life, and even now as you're going into the coaching, it's still there, the performing arts as well as people from other industries. So what do you look for if you're doing something in your own time to relax? Is it still actually performance art related, or have you found that there are other things that so Anne, who I interviewed the other week, does triathlons, which I think is complete madness, but but that also, she said, helps her with her work in terms of giving her that, I guess, release and break from what she's doing. So is there anything similar for you? Not necessarily a triathlon.
But not triathlons, I must say. No, regardless of my dancing background, I'm not a particularly athletic person anymore. But I'm fairly ordinary when it comes to interests. I mean, I do DIY, for instance. I'm quite good at it, actually. That's
Remember that.
that kind of fairly ordinary pursuits, I would have thought. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. When you're looking at your, building up your client base, finding new people to take on and work with, how do you approach that? Are you doing networking? Do you have other ways of getting, contacts?
At the moment, I employ sort of a range of strategies. I mean, obviously, I'm leverage of my professional network within the performing arts to access people in that area. Naturally, as you would as a sole operator, you have to just use all the avenues you can. And I'm trying now also to introduce myself in new environments, using my performing arts background as my USP. And that is also proving to be interesting, I think, to people. It's something which because as a coach, because there are a lot of them out there. Some of them very good, some of them less good. So it's important to have something which you can say, this is my USP. This is where I come from, and this is where I can offer a difference. And I think in my case, I have that, and I'm very fortunate to have almost 5 decades behind me of working in the theatre. There's not many people that can say that.
Well, and I think from reading through, the information you sent me, it's a really impressive career, and has exposed you to, lots of different places in the world, as well as lots of different experiences in terms of your roles within the dance world. So it's a great thing to be able to bring that and turn it into something else. So would you have, is the USP, I guess, the tip that you would give to somebody else who's aspiring to make a change and start their own business? Or do you have any other sort of key tips? I wish I'd known this. Or if somebody had just kept reminding me about X, it would have made my life better as I started my new role.
Well, if you're selling a service, it is the key thing to know is not what you can contribute, but what people want. Because people buy what they want, not what you can offer necessarily. So it's about knowing what do people want. Because people buy what they want, not what they need. So I can have as many ideas as I want about what other people need. I'm sure you need this and I could do this for you. But if that's not what they want, they're not going to buy it, are they? So it's about knowing what your potential customer may want to have and then being able to provide that. It's more about learning about your target group, your target clientele, your target market, and understand them and being able to step into their world and feel what they're feeling. Then you have a chance. And that's something which I've learned now through my coaching. And as a coach, of course, you get to know a lot about other people because they tell you what they want. So, because the thing is with coaching, which is also important to realize, that no one needs coaching. It's not something that you need. It's something that you have it because you get it because you want it. It's something that if you want coaching, then you go get coaching. If you need coaching, you probably need something else. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. And I think that there's also that element is if you've been told, so, if you're in a situation where somebody has told you that you need a coach and has essentially sent you to a coach, you're actually more likely to be very resistant to that coaching process, as opposed to having, decided that you want it and embracing it. And
you want coaching because you want something in your life to change. You want change. You want to do something different. And that's when you go, okay, coaching can help me achieve that which I want. It's not I'm going to go to coaching because I want coaching. No, you go to coaching because there's something out there that you want. And coaching can help you go get there.
It's a means to an end to help you to achieve what you're looking for.
That's right.
So that's been really interesting, Matz. And thank you very much for being on the show. And I look forward to, getting this out and making it available to other people to hear, especially with your different approach and different insights into, coaching and the world from the performance arts aspects.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to talking to you. Thank you very much.
You've been listening to Deborah Levitt on Bridging Gaps, the Business Podcast.